go back to share my screen again. Okay, so like I said, our first topic is usually WordPress news and events. So one that we kind of not really missed, but actually happened since our last meetup is WordPress celebrated an anniversary. So it's the 18th anniversary of the launch of WordPress. So if you think about it, lots happened in the web and in the world in 18 years, and certainly that's the case for WordPress. So it's really interesting. They put out this special page out there called 40% of the web, because that's basically what they've calculated WordPress powers 40% of all websites in the world, which is quite an astonishing number. So if you go to wordpress.org/40% of web, they put together a really neat timeline that shows you all the releases of WordPress from the beginning and kind of how it's changed and evolved over the years. So I won't bring that up here, but I highly encourage people to take a look, especially if you're new to WordPress. I think it does help to kind of see where it came from. You know, you can understand some decisions of where it is today and obviously where it's still going in the future. So happy, I said birthday, happy anniversary, I guess. Happy birthday / anniversary, WordPress. One other event, a major event that kind of wrapped up since our last meetup presentation is WordCamp Europe. So this one is held all virtually. If you missed it, fortunately all the sessions are available on YouTube. So if you do a search on YouTube just for WordCamp Europe 2021, you can find all the days sessions recorded there. Peter, I didn't get a chance to look at any of them. I don't know, did you attend any of the sessions, or did you get a chance to look at any of them?
Yeah, no, I did, and it was really good. The challenge that I have is now I'm starting to see some of the same presenters and all, depending on the topics and all. But there's always some standouts. What I like about a lot of the WordCamps online now is that they'll give you the schedule in advance, and you can kind of go through and pick and choose the ones that favorite them, star them, so that you can really kind of pay attention and kind of manage your time.
This one's a little tough. The one thing I don't like is they posted all the sessions on YouTube, which is great. But as far as I know, I don't think last time I looked, I didn't see timestamps in the YouTube videos.
Yeah, it was a straight. What happened was they streamed it live, and then the live stream just goes live. Gets posted. What I think the plan is to go to have everything be broken down on WordPress TV. Yeah. So that's where ultimately the WordCamps land, is WordPress.tv.
All right. So if you want to see it now before it's been broken apart, you can still just fast forward through things. And if you go look back at the day's sessions, you can match it up yourself.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah.
But it's worth checking out. Again, this is one of the biggest ones. There's obviously the WordCamp US coming up later. It's usually in the fall, I believe. We're kind of towards the tail end of the year. And I haven't heard much about that yet. I assume it's probably going to be virtual still.
Yeah.
But as we said many times too, take advantage of these WordCamps while they are virtual. It's not the same as being at them in person, but this is your opportunity to sample WordCamps from around the world and really learn from people that you normally wouldn't get a chance to hear from. So. And
just real quick, the one thing that I really did enjoy a lot, and I think we'll cover in the future, is where all the getting the contributors, the contributor community involved, and all the different ways you can get involved with documentation, testing, like accessibility, and all these different topics. And the one that I've decided I've kind of poked around, but I'm going to land in the learn.wordpress.org. And they had a breakout session and then a follow-up, and it was really great because it gave a lot of these things happen in Slack, but it was great to have some face-to-face and kind of really get an idea of how they operate and what they need. So I really enjoyed that.
Great. So those are kind of the big ones. These are obviously both things in the past. Always take a look too. WordPress itself has a page that just shows you up and coming WordCamps. I didn't really see any big ones coming up between now and our next meetup. So we always bring these to people's attention, for our monthly meetup. So anything else comes along, or we'll bring it up in our Facebook group as well. All right, so tools and plugin spotlight. What I'd like to share is last month, Peter did a couple of Chrome extensions, and I wanted to bring a few to people's attention because actually I'll show them in action today during the demo. So as I was using them this week, putting together my notes, I said, hey, wait a minute, I don't think we've really talked about these before. So two really helpful ones that I use actually quite often, I wanted to bring up. The first one is called ColorZilla. So Colorzilla, this is a Chrome extension. It's a free extension that you can add. I don't know if there's something similar for Firefox. If you're using Firefox, there might be. So I apologize. I'm only familiar with this one for Chrome. But the way I use this, and what's really nice about this is when it adds this little kind of eyedropper thing to the top of your Chrome toolbar. And what this lets you do, I'll show it in action in a second, is it lets you basically select anything on a page, most pages, not on Google's pages, most pages, and you could read the colors that are on there. So for example, this is our demo site we're gonna be looking at. So when you click on the eyedropper, it says pick color from page. As you can see, as I'm moving around the page, up in the top of my screen, it's showing what that color is in hex value. So what's neat is where this comes in handy, we'll see this a little bit later, is let's say that you're trying to build a color palette or match something to a color you see on a website. So let's say I want to match something to this green. You can see the green is this hex code 28B467. Well, when I click on it, it copies it into my clipboard. So then I could paste that into anything on the website. It also retains a history of colors too. So if I go back to my picked color history, here's all the previous ones I've picked. So real neat tool. It's very handy. And what's cool is it actually works even on pictures too. So like in Chrome, you can load a JPEG or load something else. You just have to give that permissions to Chrome. And then you can use the same thing on that JPEG. So that's the first one, Colorzilla. Very handy tool. I use it quite often. And then the second one, probably a little bit more just for people who do a lot of website design, is Page Ruler or Page Ruler Redux. I think they changed the name of this thing. So where this is handy is a lot of times you're just trying to get an idea of a size of something. So for example, and you can't use it on Chrome, but I'll show it back here again. So let's say I want to figure out how big is this button? Let's say I want to design a button that's of a similar size. Well, when I click on the Page Ruler, it gives you grid lines. So if you can see it turned my cursor to crosshair. So if I now drag my cursor across this and match it kind of the grid lines, it tells me that this button is roughly 236 pixels wide by 56 pixels high. So there may be some cases where you're like, you never need this, but I think a lot of times, especially from a positioning thing, and I'll show this in our demo later, you want to get roughly an equivalent size of something. So this is a great tool to kind of like take quick pixel measurements on existing page. And what's nice is because it's an extension, it's not affecting anything on the site. It's just running within your browser, not affecting anything on the back end. So that one's called Page Ruler Redux. And there's other ones out there too. I don't know, Peter, if you've used other similar tools that do the same kind of thing, or these are the kind of the two I've been using for a couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. But I've landed on a couple that have a little bit more. One of them is a premium one. I actually paid for it. It's the one at Hoverify that I mentioned, and then there is one called CSS Peeper, I believe, and it kind of you click on something, kind of shows you a lot of here's the colors, here's the size, and things like that. I like the ruler. You're right; it was taken off for a while. It was a security issue or something.
Yeah, they said it was asking for too many permissions or something.
Yeah.
The other place I use it quite often is, or sometimes really quite often. Sometimes is for things like looking at padding.
Yes.
So, if you want to look at, all right, how much padding roughly is there here? So let's say 32 pixels ish.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they're both that, and then the font finder are the three that'll kind of get you what you need when you need to just kind of figure out something real quick.
And they're free, so that's the other good thing here. All these are free. So all right, so those are just the tips to share with folks, and let's dive into our real presentation. Sorry, let me move this. My Zoom window always blocks my PowerPoint slides, so I can close that up and go back 1 second. And this I'll make full screen for right now. Can you see my screen still?
Yep.
See the slides? All right. All right, so welcome back everyone to part 2, if you were here for part 1 of Let's Build a Site Together. So real quick, the agenda, we're gonna do some short introductions, Peter and myself. I'll do a recap of part 1. We'll talk also about some things that you'll need if you're following along. And we'll share them as well too. We'll talk maybe a little bit at that time how we're going to share these with you. So if you are following along, and again, not live necessarily, but you can get the same assets that we're using. Then Peter is going to cover global settings, so configuring some global settings in Kadence, Kadence being the theme that we're using. We'll take a little break there maybe for any Q&A for that first portion. And then we're going to dive right into continuing to build out the site. So I'm going to build out the header to begin with. I'll spend around 15 minutes doing that. And then Peter's going to start building out the home page, starting with the hero section, which is that first section. And then we'll have Q&A time in there as well. But again, questions and answers, feel free to bring them up as we're building things. And then we'll talk about what's next in part 3, because we won't be done today with part 2. So about me, I'm Ray. I've been in IT as a software developer / architect for 25 plus years. Worked for large corporations for most of my career. Been using WordPress 4+ years-ish. I have my own web design business now, so I'm self-employed. I live in Newington, Connecticut. Married, no kids. We have one crazy old cat, and I am a geek. Peter.
I'm Peter Ingersoll. I live in South Windsor, Connecticut. I've been using technology in support of sales, marketing, creative. I build and maintain WordPress sites since about 10 years now. I've been kind of on my own, on and off, after being corporate. Worked for the Hartford Current, our Hartford paper. Worked for an advertising agency, a logistics company. I'm self-taught in a lot of things, and I'm married with 2 adult children. No pets right now. And I got all the parts for my computer that I am now halfway building. So I am very excited about that.
Nice. And as I mentioned to folks before too, if you joined a little bit late, feel free to put in the chat window who you are, what's your name, where you're from, and how long you've been using WordPress. Or if you want to mention your pets too, go right ahead in the chat window. Yep. All right, so let's do a quick recap of part 1, which was last month. For folks who either forgot or didn't join us for that, here's kind of the big picture of this project that we're doing, this multiple part meetup project. Our goal is to build a moderately complex website from scratch. And again, all these words are very deliberate. So we don't want to build something too simple. So we're going to build complexity onto this thing, but we're not going to build some crazy, e-commerce, all bells and whistles kind of site in the end. We want to do something that was meaty enough that you'll learn from it, but that's simple enough that everyone can follow along. For everyone to be able to follow along, we also want to make sure that everything is free that we're sharing here. So we're going to only use free plugins when needed. That's another key piece, which I think we maybe didn't emphasize enough last time. So we're trying to do things as much as possible natively with WordPress. So we don't want to just throw WordPress plugins at a problem until we show you the problem, and then maybe show you, hey, can it be solved without a plugin? And then if a plugin solves it and it's easier, that's fine. But we want to just not immediately attack a problem with a plugin. We're going to try to build on this project through each meetup. So again, this is the very beginning. So certainly follow along, because as we go farther and farther along, obviously we hope we're building on more of the foundations of what we're doing here. So we're going to also try to share best practices, and again, that's kind of a loaded term, but versus quick and dirty solutions. So these best practices are, experience that Peter and I have had from working with different clients. But we're also looking for other people's best practices too. Again, we're always willing to learn here as a group. But what we won't do is just some hack solutions that, again, don't really work very well. We want everyone to be hands-on with us as much as possible. So obviously it's tough to do while we're presenting, but that's the reason that we're recording these. So ideally, our goal would be that people follow the presentation afterwards, and then for either in the Facebook group, if you're having any issues, or wherever, you can contact us. And then, next month, everyone should be at the same place where we are when we start off. So everyone's building along. And part of that too is that we also want to make it very democratic, that you don't even need to have hosting. You can build this locally. Peter's building his through a hosting service where he has his own domain where he can do this. And the reason for that is so that we can show people kind of a finished product or an in-progress product. But you don't have to build it that way. In fact, I'm building everything locally, and I assume most people are building locally. So you don't even need any hosting involved. That's kind of the big picture. That's our big goals. And a reminder, to make things more specific rather than just some nebulous thing, what we're building is a fictional nonprofit website. It's for an animal rescue, and we called it the cleverly named WP Animal Rescue. So And again, as we talked about this before, with any website, you've got to think about the goals of the website. So for this, our fictional animal rescue, some of the goals are to provide education, to visitors, to get donations for the animal rescue, to facilitate pet adoptions, and to recruit volunteers. So there could be other goals, but some of those are going to be some of the biggest goals that we're going to keep in mind as we're building out the site. So obviously, everyone here isn't necessarily building sites for animal shelters, but we think that using a concrete example like this, you're going to still see tools and techniques and other things that we're using that will be good for any type of website. So again, think about it more broadly, even though it is a very specific project that we're doing. And as we said, don't start with a blank page. So we've picked an example. So this is from a website company called Duda. They're kind of like Squarespace. They build sites through templates. So they have a lot of different example templates out there. So we're using this kind of to give ourselves an idea of a structure, at least for the home page. So I'll show you a little bit later what this structure looks like. But this is a template, a free template they have in place for a nonprofit, and we're going to kind of use that as our starting point for what we're building out. All right, so that's our inspirations. That was part one. That's really where we ended off last month. We had a lot of other discussion about getting started. We talked everyone through building or setting up their local environment, and then Peter also talked about Kadence. So I didn't touch upon that, but we'll talk about Kadence a lot more. So Kadence is a free theme that we picked. One of the main reasons is it plays very well with Gutenberg. So we decided not to use page editors. We want to use a theme that, like I said, is flexible, but also is also one that works well with kind of what WordPress provides out of the box. So now let's talk some specific things about our website. So we needed to make some design choices. So if you recall last time, Peter talked a bit about planning for your build, and one of the design considerations you need to make are things like your fonts. What fonts do you want to use? And our best practice rule of thumb was try to keep it down to 2 fonts, if possible. I mean, maybe have another third font for some quote text or things like that. But we decided for our site to stick with 2 main fonts, one for headlines and one for body. And we're using Google fonts. So we're using Montserrat and then Open Sans, or Open Sans if you prefer. So the way, just broke out the presentation for a second. So there's a tool here called in fonts.google.com where you can look up your fonts, and here is Montserrat, and you can see what it looks like live as it's paired with other fonts. So for example, here's Montserrat with Roboto. So Montserrat in this case is the headline, and here's Roboto as the body text. So it's a really neat tool, free, again, part of just Google Fonts, where you can get a good idea. They give you suggestions of which fonts pair pretty well. So again, as you're visiting sites or seeing different sites throughout the web these days, Google Fonts seem to be everywhere. And quite often you'll see these pairings because they work well. They're easy to read. They work well on different platforms, etc. So that's our first major design decision was Montserrat and Open Sans. So again, if you're following along, if you want to be completely identical to what we're building, those are the 2 fonts we're using. If you want to, customize things yourself and use a different family of fonts, go for it. These are the design decisions we needed to make, but you can make your own as you're following along in our example.
Yeah. Hey, Ray, can I interject here?
Yep.
One thing that we didn't mention, honestly, just kind of came to me in that as we put this series together, and now we're in part 2, part 3, part 4. At this stage, while we're looking at best practices, we are not necessarily looking for the most optimized site. In fact, it may be pretty fun to, once we build the whole site, then to look at it and say, oh, what can we optimize? Images, even fonts and things like that. Where are we loading the fonts from and all. So those who are a little bit more seasoned might look at some of these things and go, oh, are you sure you want to do that? To start, yeah, that's what we're going to do. But we'll have. It'll be fun to kind of use this as a site that we can keep coming back to, and when we talk about optimization, well, how can we optimize what we've built? So
that's a great point, because you're right. You and I had this discussion in our planning sessions, but so you are going to see a couple of things that we're going to have a to-do list afterwards, and that's real life too. So I think that's a good thing to show people that you're not building the perfect site right off the bat. You have to go through iterations of a site, and some of it is making those cost benefit trade-offs, like how much performance tuning you want to do versus how much time you have, and is it worth it depending on the site. So that's a great point, Peter, that as we're going through this, things may change. In fact, I can almost guarantee you things will change, because we'll see some things laid out and then we'll look at it and say, yeah, let's go back and change that. But for right now, just to get started, as I said, we're picking these two font families. So Montserrat is for the headlines and Open Sans for the body. So fonts was a big thing. Next is colors. We talked a bit last time about color theory and kind of different ideas behind picking colors. So this is where that color picker tool that I showed comes in handy. So one of the design assets we'll share with everyone building along is we started putting together some logos for our animal shelter. And both the logos, which I built through Canva, are using this particular shade of red. So using ColorZilla, I found the hex value of that red is EB1212. So using that, you don't have to do this, but a lot of times you think of branding, a lot of times you want your website colors to match your brand. And, a lot of times your branding is in your logo or other kind of marketing materials you have. So to keep things simple, we're going to use that as one of our primary colors to really drive our color palette. So the other tool that we, again, when you think about color theory, there's a lot of different color theories. One of the ones we'll talk about is complementary colors. So from a color wheel standpoint, those are colors that are directly across from each other on the color wheel. So they're opposites of each other, but that's why they complement each other. So it really works best when one of them is the main color and then the other one is an accent color, because they are so different from each other. So the tool that Peter had shared before is this color.adobe.com color wheel. And let me bring that up again. So this is another free tool. Again, we love our free tools here. And it's really neat, so when you come to this tool, it gives you these different kind of these rules. So as I said, we're going, for just to keep our project moving along, we're going by looking for complementary colors. You can look at analogous colors, which are ones that are closer to each other. You look at triad colors, as the name implies, as a triangle. But for our project to kind of get started, the way this tool works is you input in a hex value here. So I put it in the EB1212, and then it comes up with, using the color wheel, it comes up with this spectrum of complementary colors. So as you can see, with the reds, the green is going to be our accent color. So from an accent standpoint, as far as the website goes, that'll be things like probably our buttons, just any other things that are not like the main headlines or kind of the main color scheme on the site. So again, accents, as the name implies too, you kind of use sparingly. So that's our other big design decision here is, and we'll send everyone these codes as well too. So as you're playing along, you'll see Peter's going to put these into the configuration. So we have our red colors and then we have our greens. That's going to be in our color palette.
Hey, Ray.
Everyone likes pictures too. So the other part of this is, as I said, we'll provide you these. We'll provide you copies of our logo and our favicon.
Hey, Ray?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter. Yep.
I think we have a question.
Yeah, this is Reese. I was wondering if there are any tips on when there's too much color, meaning you've picked too many colors and your site's now become a color wheel.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there are some really great experts out there who have focused on the design side of all this. And yeah, you could definitely have too many colors. And even, starting with complementary and then saying, well, what actually works and when is something used? Because, the other problem is when you have things that are polar opposites also, the science of color on a website is a bit of a challenge. I'll try to see if there's any specific resources. There are two designers out there that come to mind that have provided some kind of, they're pretty practiced in giving you some ideas on what to pay attention to.
Yeah, and there's a book, I still have it somewhere in my bookshelf behind me too, that also it's for web design as well. It offers some good some good guidance for that. So but I think you hit it on the head. It's too many colors can be distracting. Not enough colors can also just be boring and bland. So I think it's something in between. There's probably not a hard and fast rule. Like it's like the plugins. How many plugins is too many plugins? I don't know, 50, 5, 2, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, great question though.
Thank you.
So design assets, as I said, we didn't have time, or we're not going to spend a lot of time creating these. So just to talk quickly about the logo. So, our site is called WP Animal Shelter. So if you have free tools, and if you have some artistic ability, or some of the tools like Canva, for example, it gives you some decent templates to create a very simple, basic logo like this. I mean, these graphics and the lettering and everything, this is all built in Canva. But if you're a real business, most likely you either want to hire somebody, or as I said, or get in touch with a graphic designer to create a logo for you, or use a site like Fiverr.com or other sites like that, where sort of the marketplaces for graphic designers to create a logo for you. Ideally, when you are looking for a logo, you want to make sure that you are provided as many of the assets from that logo as possible. Meaning, don't just get the logos. If you're working with a designer, for example, don't just get the low res JPEG version of that file sent to you. Ideally, you want to get the highest quality version, PNGs, SVG possible, etc. Because you don't know where else you're going to use that logo. So obviously, for a website, you don't need a gigantic, heavy file, but you may for printed materials, and SVGs is certainly scale better too on websites. So anyway, just for the sake of time, because we didn't want to go through the creation of this, we'll provide this logo and so favicon too. We'll talk about the favicon a little bit when we add to the site. And then the other images are for that hero section. As we talked about last time, there's plenty of great sources for free, copyright-free images that you can use on your website. So Unsplash was the one that we said we're going to get our images for as we're building out the site. So we're going to have the hero section. I threw it up to Peter of we're either going to have, rather than put a dog there or a cat there, or we'll figure something out for one or the other. So these are kind of the two candidate images for now. So I like the dog because he's staring at you. It seems like, give me a donation kind of thing. he's got those very needful eyes, whereas cats are like cats. They don't want to look at you anyway. But so we'll figure out how we're going to use those, and any images that we use as we're building out the site, we'll make sure we share the links with you so you can download them yourself. Again, they'll be free images. So I'm just going to mute Francisco. And then again, one of the hardest parts is getting started. So we're not going to build out a lot right now, but as we're building out the site, where appropriate, we'll give some suggestions for some of the content. So, in an ideal world, before you build out any page, you would have an outline of the text. And the reason for that is just so you don't get too caught up as you're building of just sticking in lorem ipsum text and all that, because ultimately a website should be it shouldn't just look good. It also should have a meaningful message for the visitors. So you want to give that some thought. You want to put that into ideally like a Word document, make sure there's no spelling errors, etc. Make sure that your headings and headlines are set up properly. But for our sake, to kind of just get quickly started on the project, we have a couple of ideas for the headings and subheadings for that first hero section. So again, we'll provide this to you, or you'll see as Peter's building it out. So don't feel like you have to follow exactly the exact text that we're using, but here's some ideas for you. So having said all that, now let's segue into you, Peter, configuring the global settings.
Yeah, why don't you just kind of keep showing the slides, and then I'll take it for the when we get into the demo, because I think I've got a demo in this section, right? Yeah.
Yep. And so I'll make this full screen in 1 second. I just got to move my window around. Sorry. Keep talking. I'll make it.
Yeah. No. So the slides aren't really much other than this tell you what we're going to get into. So when we talk about kind of the global settings, or the settings that you start with, Kadence has its own settings, and you're managing those within the customizer. Like everything, WordPress has multiple ways to get there. I'll show you that, including when you go into Appearance and then Kadence options, it literally are just links to areas within the customizer. Specifically to start, we're going to be looking at the overall layout, how pages appear on the site, colors, We'll look at buttons because we're going to use button just to see. We'll use default now when we get there, but you'll see, where that is in the customizer. Things specific to the page layout will be, the max width and the spacing, things like that. We are going to talk about site identity, using some of the settings that Ray gave me in terms of the title, the logo. Ray, I'm probably going to let you kind of manage that as part of the heading to start, but I can, we are both going to be kind of parallel in the way we some of the stuff that Ray's doing. I'm going to work alongside him doing what he's teaching all of us. And then things that are specific to the home page itself, which is very, very minimal in your initial settings, but something to pay attention to. All right, next. So then when we get into it, I just want to show this to you. This is very specific to Kadence, and it's the way the global palettes work. And I wanted to make sure there was a slide in here so we can kind of look at this, and I'll show you where you can find this. If you're using Kadence, in Kadence, there is a link when you go into the colors that will go out to a page that will describe how their palettes work specific to this theme. And again, we often talk about, and kind of remind us, if you're using a different theme, it may or may not have what you're seeing here. In fact, specifically, this is a very Kadence specific area when it talks about when they display their global palette. And part of it is the way they break down the colors into accents, contrast, base. So the accents are buttons and certain attention elements. It's sort of, and these are the default colors. You can override anything. Contrast, or the contrast section are basically your text colors from dark to a little bit lighter, depending on how you use them. The base colors that they have are more background colors. But then as you get into specific things on a granular level, down to from a page to a block, you can then choose custom colors as you go. But an example of one palette over other is this is out of their own documentation, are the two images on the bottom right that shows one palette applied, the other palette applied, where now you're flipping like a light and a dark and that type of thing. So you can have 3 palettes set up as you're experimenting with how you want to manage colors. But it's a nice way of setting up default colors.
And I'm not sure if you're going to get into this, Peter, but this is one of those things that I wish more themes did. I think more themes are kind of copying this idea. And the reason for this, kind of getting back to the why do you want to do this? It's because in the past you would have to either set your color palette individually on pages or components, or using page builders on rows. And the problem with that is that when you want to change something, let's say you don't like a shade of blue, you have to go to 50 or 100 different places and change it. The idea of a global palette is you change it in one place, and immediately all the other places that are using that color have been updated. So it's a huge time saver, but it does require you to think a little bit. Again, that's why we talked about doing this in a real structured way, is think about your palette before you start building.
Right, exactly. Great point. And in fact, at the end of today's primary session, there's some things we can show. There are plugins that can help with that, and we can talk about what is planned for WordPress, because this will be something that will be coming more going forward, but there are some solutions to put in place. Kadence did a great job as part of the theme. There are plugins, and what the future brings will be interesting. So let's show this. Okay, so what I'll do is grab let me know what you see.
I see your Kadence. Yep. I see your customizer.
Great, perfect. Okay. So I've got kind of 2 versions of this site going, and I'm trying to keep our demo site as clean as possible from where we came out of the last session, which means there's basically nothing here. I don't think I have any plugins loaded. Sorry, I'm going to delete that. I experimented something with Gutenberg. no plugins loaded, just the Kadence theme. Let me update it. That's always dangerous to do on a live.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. So, and post just what came in as a demo. So anyway, this is pretty much straight down. So what we're looking at right now, as we've done in a number of our sessions, is the WordPress admin. So there are a couple of things in the WordPress admin that are part of our global settings that are worth paying attention to. So when you have your first install, when you first load up WordPress, one of the first areas you would be looking under is under settings, and just under general settings. These are considered global settings, and this is where we'll set our site title, which I have. That was from before. Did we come up with a tagline, Ray?
No.
Let's come up with a tagline.
You can use the one. What did I have? What are some of the ones in the?
Help a pet in need. We're ready for a forever home. Yeah. We'll go with help a pet in need.
Yeah, help a pet in need.
It was the first one there.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where at the very kind of, and this is generic to all WordPress installs. This is WordPress itself, general settings. One thing that you might want to pay attention to on a new install is setting the time zone, checking the date format to see that it matches. So that's just the way things will appear on your site, and for blog posts it kind of helps set the right time when you post things and all. So under reading, this is one area we'll come back to, but the main thing in reading when we do our homepage is how your homepage displays. By default, the Kadence and many themes will default to, in fact, all, right? Default to the blog post listing or the blog post archive, which is right now, your default is your latest post. We're going to change it to a static page that we're going to create. This is also visible. You'll see that multiple things can be reached in different places. It's also in the Kadence customizer. And then one thing that sometimes I forget when I'm first in there, and I found it's interesting for me when I do new installs, it's the permalink with the URL, the address, is often not what I want. I'm pretty much using just the post name. This is something that you can change as easy as this when needed, but it's better to do it earlier on so you're used to seeing it, and if you have any manual links and things like that. So we're just going to change it to that. But that's kind of all we need to worry about so much in the right out of the gate, kind of the global settings in WordPress. But now we're going to go into the Kadence settings, which is under Appearance and Customize, or as I mentioned, Appearance Custom Kadence. A lot of these links here on the dashboard really just go to the customizer. So you see global colors, customize, branding. These are all actually going to open up your customizer. So if I do this, I've opened up the customizer by clicking on that in the dashboard, and then it goes to that area. So it's a nice kind of way from Appearance Kadence, this little dashboard to use. We're very used to using the customizer because you can reach the customizer from multiple ways. So all I did there was under Appearance and Customize. When you have a page, when you're logged in, your Customize button is very much link is. It sits in that admin toolbar at the top, so that's why starting from the base of the customizer is something that we're used to. Now, when you're first setting up, the area that you're looking at initially is the general section. So the sections we're going to be looking at are general page layout. Ray, you're going to look at header, right?
Yep.
And then site identity, and Ray, you may be looking at menu, and then homepage settings. But under general is where sort of the mass of the global settings, and these are the global default settings. Again, you can override these, and Kadence is a good theme for making it pretty easy to override something. It gets, as I mentioned in the slide, you can get kind of granular. So under layout, and I'm gonna do something here that I wanted to make sure. If I go back to the dashboard, go under pages, I created a page, a sample page, and I do this a lot of times just to make it easier for me to see the changes that I made. So while this isn't necessarily a page that's going to be on the website, WordPress will load up with the sample page. I have, and we can make this available. You know, I use a bunch of other things in a sample page so I can see and you know, what the effects of what I'm doing, how they affect the site. So if I'm that's why I put in the headings and the styles and things like that. This is the default, haven't done anything Kadence page. So now if I come back to the customizer, actually, and what's nice is if you go to, while the page is open, go to customize, I will now see that page in my customizer. That's kind of a nice, again, look at the page sample, and these changes that we make as we go will show up right in front of you. It's kind of, you know, as you go. So one of the things I noticed out of Kadence is it's a wide layout, and if we look at the sample that we had, I've got it here somewhere. It wasn't as wide, so I moved this down to on the global settings, the content max width, I changed to 960. And as you saw, what happened was the white boxed area right now is showing me my max content area. I dropped that down. It was like 12 something, so it's wider. You know, you could go 400 if you want, but you wouldn't typically do that. In fact, there's a setting for narrow content layout, which is used elsewhere. But I just put in 960 because actually it was the width of our sample site. Probably using a ruler tool like you use, Ray.
Mm-hmm.
The content top and bottom spacing, that's, it says I move this, it moves that. You know, right now I'll put it down to 2 because I think that spacing was a little bit, but we can modify that
Peter,
as
can I
we
ask you a
go.
question?
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
Exactly what you're doing.
Yep.
Kadence, which is new to us, we're conquering Kadence.
Okay.
They start this in pixels, then rems,
Yes.
and they keep moving around.
Right.
But do you stick with them or do you override them?
Me personally, so what they're using here makes sense, and here's why. So pixels is what we're used to seeing in terms of actual like screen real estate width. So when you're using a tool like Ray was using with the rulers and what we're used to images, that's using the pixel, the PX setting. Rem is basically the height of a line of text. And in this case, your default text, because so what Rem gives you is flexibility that happens actually on the fly depending on the size of the font that you're using. Now, this can be changed in Kadence to a different, and I can't remember, what do they call these? A measurement.
Which ones? The M's? You mean?
Yeah, you know, but
Yeah.
They're relative. They're either relative units or absolute units. So
yeah,
some of this stuff,
it's just units. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like if you set pixels, that's going to be exact pixels, right?
Right.
Rem is relative to the height of the page. M is similar to Rem. I can't remember the exact difference between them. You know,
it's the height of the letter M with
yeah, right,
on a
right.
quarter type
yeah,
writer.
vertical.
And then yeah. So most people, quite honestly, are very comfortable using pixels still,
Yeah,
because
it's
it
basically
feels.
the white space in a line.
I think so. One thing I think we will do is we're going back to the optimizing the site. I think as we start doing more responsive changes
Yeah.
to the site, I think that's when we'll talk units quite a bit more, because there
Okay,
are some places where I think we do want to use either percentages or M's or Rems, but I think just for setting that baseline, again, this 960 pixels, that's also just the baseline for the desktop version. It's not, you know, for,
Right, exactly. If we go into, and the way Kadence works is you have desktop, tablet, and mobile. right now, I think we feel, and Ray, you and I agree that it's easier to right now to show desktop, and most everything
Yeah.
happens automatically for mobile, but then we go into mobile to tweak it.
I think we'll
I-
adjust it, yeah, and where necessary in different places, but yeah, I think primarily we'll build this out through desktop.
Exactly, and because we're not getting into actual page layout today, we're only doing a homepage layout. Things like the positioning and the height of the title, we're not looking at just yet, because when we go to the homepage, we're going to make the title invisible. Yeah, there's a lot of variables. I think most people are comfortable with pixels to start. What they're doing is, in terms of vertical height that happens within text areas, they're using the rem unit cadences as a default. Okay, so that when we get into, we're not worrying about single post or archive grid. We can come back to these settings once we're doing those particular pages. But this kind of gives us a start, and the main one that was important for what we're doing right now is the content max width. And the only reason I touched the top and bottom spacing is because it can have an effect depending on how we lay our hero section in. I'll show you how we're going to override that too. If I publish that now, those go live right now. You can keep editing within the customizer and then publish all at the end, or as you get each section done, you can decide that you'll save then, because you don't want to make a whole lot of changes and have something happen where you lose everything. It's just the good practice for that. So here's the whole topic of colors, and the palette 1, palette 2, palette 3 out of the box, they're all the same, and it gives you that option to be able to set up 3 palettes and kind of work out how they're going to work for you. And this was that link I was telling you, learn how to use this. That link is right out of the customizer, and this is, I grabbed those graphics and gets into all the detail of how things are being used here. So that's a nice handy little tool that gives you some detail. The only thing I'm going to initially change are the accent colors, and I'm going to change the accent colors to Ray's suggestions, and we may come back and override things. So if I grab the green color, I'm just copying it off screen here, and I come and click on that, and I put in the actual hex code. That's the green, and the red, the primary red color,
And we'll provide these to everyone afterwards
Yeah.
too, so you don't, yeah.
is here. So now I have a palette. My palette 2 and palette 3 remain the same, and this is good because then you can experiment, or when you do like a button and you say, do I like the way that worked? And right now, what's nice is those colors there, and I should have shown before I changed these were blue buttons. Buttons use the accent colors, and what they, if we go back to this page here, out of the Kadence site, it says accent. The second accent, think of this, what happens when you hover over an accent color is an often way that it's used. So specifically a button goes from the green accent color to the red hover color. So there's a perfectly appropriate live showing of how that works. Now you may decide, what, maybe what I really want, I want to experiment, I want green, and I won't go to a color tool, but say I make it green and say, what, I want to make my hover color a darker green. So all I did there, now I might go to a color wheel. In this case, I just put in the same color and then change my custom color using this whole color pick box. And now when I hover over it, it just goes to a darker green. So you might find that a little bit more pleasing, but we can, if I change back to palette 1, it's showing me. So it gives you that opportunity to kind of work with palettes as you're developing your site. So that's a nice way to put.
That's kind of how I did it. So when I was
Yeah.
building, I took the red. So like in the color wheel thing, I put the darker red as the primary accent color, and then the lighter red is the second one there. And then on my color palette 2, I took the darker green as the first one, and then the lighter green is the second.
Yeah. So what you did, say this. So now I'm on palette 3, and I'm putting in the red, and then you had a secondary red as my second accent color. I just cut and paste it, so it's a red and a lighter red. So now that's how that works. So now we have these 3 palettes that we can experiment with and kind of have them at our disposal. Only one's going to be activated at one time. Then you've got all of these other custom colors, even though like our default colors of the background are all the base colors, and the text is the contrast colors. But you can, as you get into each one, get more specific for specific areas. So in a lot of cases, I'm leaving, like what I'll probably end up changing, for example, would be link colors. All right, so link is using the initial and the hover color, you know, if you have a live link, but that might not be appropriate because it might not be something somebody's used to. So we can, when we get into pages that might have links on it, we can adjust that. So I'm going to leave any preference where I should leave this, Ray? What would you like?
Doesn't matter. I mean, the color things are more of just showing people how to set it, and then
All right, so we'll publish that, and let me go back to customize. And what else do I have in the customizer to look at? Okay, so we've got the layout, the colors, the buttons right now. So under general and buttons, you'll see that my active palette, they're showing you these are the colors that you're going to use. You can override that in buttons. You can override text color, all that thing. We're just going to leave that at default for now because we're not going to get that kind of nitpicky about things, because we haven't even looked at anything yet. Now, if we get into typography, again, we're still under the customizer, general, typography. This is where you select those fonts. So the base font, and out of the box, you're using the system font. So this font that you're looking at is kind of the default sans serif system font. We are going to override this by when you click on what font do you want, and we're going to start with Open Sans. And Kadence, like most modern themes now, do connect to the Google font library. Pretty straightforward. Now this is all you're looking at the Open Sans font. This is everything is Open Sans because that is the base font that we're using, and the base paragraph font is 17 pixels. We can start, you know, do we want it 17 pixels? Do we want it 20? Let's leave it at 20. I kind of like, I like that to start. We can come back, and again, this is global. You get into a certain area, you can get a little bit more specific, but now you're setting your font, your font size, and you can also set your line height and letter spacing if you really want to get kind of a very specific design style. Right now, we'll just go with the font size. And then for headings, you have one master heading size, and then you can, again, get specific. So the word inherit for each one of these is telling you, take the base font and use that for my headings, and then all the headings are saying, we'll use what I told you in the heading font. So it's inheriting all the way down. What we're going to do is we're going to change this to the Montserrat font. And you can see what's nice in the customizer. And when you have a sample page, you can see what that change is going live. And the Montserrat font carries down for each heading, H1, H2, H3, because it's inheriting from the family. Now we could decide to tweak the size, you know, do we want the H2s to be Montserrat? And right now I would say we do. We want to leave that specific. The other things that we're seeing under typography we haven't looked at yet, which is, you know, the H1 title above content, that's in an area that we may not even see with this site. So that's now getting the Open Sans and Montserrat font in place, so that they are now the fonts that our website is using per our design area. And I think, okay, so that's under general. Now what we want to do is look at under the site identity. This is where the site title and all, Ray's going to cover this in when he goes over the header, but it also shows you how, again, you can get to different things different ways, through different paths, depending on, but what we're going to be looking at under site identity is the select site icon. That is the icon that we're going to use, what we often call a favicon. It's the icon that if you it'll show up in your tabs. If you have an external link, say on as an app, you would see that logo. So we're going to set that, select a site icon. Now, the site icon, in fact, I think it says here, site icon should be square, at least 512 by 512 pixels. And typically we'll use a transparent font. So Ray was nice enough to create for us this ping file. Ping files have an alpha channel, allows it to have a transparent background, doesn't need to. Ray did this in Canva, and we'll share this. But this 512 by 512 image will be the one that we're going to use. So I will say select the site icon, and then all I need to do is drag and drop this to the site. It's going to upload it. I'll select that, and now, if you notice, can you see that at the top of the screen?
Yep.
Instead of it having the W WordPress, we now have the site icon, and that's how you set your favicon or your site icon. You create an image that's square, 512 by 5 pixels, or it could be larger, and then you load it up right under here under site identity. Site icon. It's great, and
it's one of those. Just get my 2 cents on those. I mean, you do see a lot of sites out there where they've left the default, the WordPress one out there, and again, it's not going to affect anything. It's not going to affect your performance, whatever. But to me, it's one of those things that just makes your site more polished.
Yes.
Especially if you're somebody like me who has like 50 browser tabs open.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's helpful to see the icons. Oh, that's this one or that's that one. So it's a nice finishing touch.
Yeah,
it's one of those things where it's good to think of it early on, but it's also site identity and branding too. It's another way to brand your site.
Yeah, it is polished. It's being nice to the people who do have many tabs open. And then what's kind of funny is, for some of us who go to a lot of sites, we start recognizing the default ones. Like I know what's a Drupal site, what's a Joomla site, what's a hosted on DreamHost and Bluehost, because they have, they default to their icon. So it's pretty, it can be pretty amusing to see, and that's why when you see kind of commonality, it's because they haven't added their own identity. And then the last area would be on the homepage setting, only because we're going to talk about a homepage. All I'm showing you is that it's, even though you're in the customizer, you saw the same thing that we saw under the WordPress settings and our homepage settings, which is, are you doing it on your latest post, or are you going to have an actual page? Right, I think I burned my time, and I think I got everything.
Yep.
Right.
I was trying to keep up with you while you're doing it, so my site be
All right.
fairly close.
Oh yeah, I'm asking you to talk and type at the same time. So.
All right, so this is kind of our first little pause too. So for folks who are following along, hopefully we'll stop there for, we've been having some questions in the chat and as we're going along, and that's great. So certainly bring up your questions. Don't wait until the end. But just kind of a real quick checkpoint of where we are. So again, part one, we loaded the theme. We made some design decisions. So that was what we talked about, certain fonts and colors. And again, they may be the wrong decisions, not wrong, but they may not be the best decisions. We could change them later. They're not world-shattering decisions if we change them, but we needed to then put those into the site so that later, as we're building out pages, all those things are pre-configured. So that was basically what Peter was showing. We're getting to building out content. This was the pre-steps. Make sense to everyone? Everyone's on the same page so far? All right, good. Silence.
Any questions so far?
I think we always had some comments and stuff in the chat. I think people
good.
Everyone's following along.
Perfect.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. So I'm going to jump into the building the header section. So again, right now we just got the parts in place, but now let's start building something. So let me share my desktop again. Can you see my desktop?
We can.
Okay, and just real quick, again, this doesn't matter too much, but folks who are following along, who will follow along using local. So Peter was is building his site through his hosting. But if you're following along through local, really part one was installing a site on local on your computer. And hopefully if you're using our naming convention, you called it WP Animal Shelter. So from local, the first thing you want to do is once you launch the local application, you want to start the site. So that basically starts it up on your computer. So as we mentioned last time, there's two ways to do that. Simplest way is hover your mouse over the site. It turns into a little play button. If you click on that, it'll swirl a little bit and it'll load the site. So again, remember, this site is running just on my computer. None of you can point to it right now. This is just local on my PC. And once the site is started up local, then I can just go into admin and I'm basically back to where Peter was. Okay, so I just want to cover that step again. So now we're at the point where I've pretty much hopefully followed along with what Peter configured. I'll probably go back afterwards, make sure I got everything. I missed the tagline, for example, but I'll clean that up. But let's build a header now. So this is something too that it's going to be changing in the future, meaning very, very near term. One of the big announcements that's in beta right now is, in fact, for WordPress, is the ability to use the block editor anywhere, including the header. Because that's, again, if you're just using one of the out-of-the-box WordPress themes, like, for example, the 2021 theme, unfortunately, you don't have access to what we're going to be showing today. I'm not going to update Kadence. I'm not that brave. But the theory is that what we're showing you, even though it's specific to Kadence, this idea of the way you build a header is something that will be something going forward out of the box from WordPress. So again, what you're learning now isn't just totally specific to Kadence. So let's go back to again, level setting. Here's our example site. So we sent this link out in part one, but we'll send it out again in part two. So this is our template site. Again, it's nothing to do with Animal Shelter, but we want to build something similar. So if we look at their header, this is going to be our inspiration for our header. Their header has a logo on the left-hand side, so it's very common, a menu in the middle, and then a call to action button on the side. And the call to action button does some interesting things, which we'll dive into a little bit later. So this is what we want to build. We want to build something very similar to this, obviously with our pieces. So again, keep this in mind or keep this on the side as we're building along. And I'll refer back to this as I'm building out pieces. So let's, in Kadence, as Peter said, the first thing you want to do is you want to go into, there's two ways to go into this. You can go, I'll go through Appearance Kadence, and they have a thing in here called the header layout. So if I click Customize, this will basically launch that same customizer. So the first thing we want to do in here is let's set our logo. So as I said, we'll share this file with you. But when you click on logo, first thing you want to do is you want to upload a logo from your computer. So I'll click on the select logo button here, and I'm going to upload it. So let me select my file. And this is our logo. So here's what it looks like. I'll open it. We're not going to do any of the SEO stuff really right now. So I'm not going to put any, accessibility things. So I'm not going to put any alt text in here. In the future, we can go back and fix some of these. So once I select my logo, first things I don't want to crop. It's already been cropped. So one thing I should have showed, sorry, let me go back to this again, is the nice thing is it tells you a suggested size. So when I uploaded it, its suggested dimensions are 200 by 80 pixels. And that's going to vary by most themes, but this is pretty common. So 200 pixels wide by 80 pixels high. And that's what this file is. It's already set to that 200 by 80 because I created this in Canva. So I'm going to select it. We're not going to do any cropping. So remember, WordPress has its own built-in image cropping thing, but in this case, we just skip the cropping. And there it is. So that's our first piece. So it's kind of there, but it's not exactly how we want it. So this is starting point number one. We've set the logo. So by default, Kadence is saying, the logo layout for this site is going to be logo and title. So remember, our site is called WP Animal Shelter, but in this case, we just want the logo. So you want to switch that first to logo only. And boom, that got rid of the title. So that was one of the first things. The next part is this looks a little tight. So going back to our discussion about units and all that, if we look back on the Duda site, And this is where the calendar, this is the handy, the little measuring ruler comes in place. If you look at this, you know, they've got a little bit of space here. I mean, again, I don't know if exactly that's where their logo starts and ends, but let's say they have around, I don't know, 30, 40 pixels there, and maybe 30, 40 pixels below-ish, something like that. So basically, we want some breathing room around our logo. If you look at this right now, it's a little tight in there. So that's one of the first things that we can do is on the design tab over here, you can, through Kadence, you can add padding. And the way this works is, I believe, and again, we'll see this visually, but I think this is top left, bottom right. It kind of follows the CSS rules if you ever set this through CSS. So I'm going to pick, I already had some things here. Let's say 30. We're going to go 30 pixels on top. That looks like a lot. Yeah. Let's do 15.
Yeah, and Ray, that is consistent. Whenever you see 4 boxes that are for padding, margin, whatever, it's top right, bottom left.
Right. And the neat thing is you can play around with this too. So if you're saying, well, what is this one? Just put in a number there and you'll see it visually. Again, it's showing us. So 15, what we've done is we've added 15 pixels padding top and bottom. Again, this is just for desktop. We'll talk mobile a little bit more later, but this gives everything a little bit more breathing room. So that's our first thing is we've got the logo in here, we've got our site identity in here, and I am paranoid, so I do publish quite often just to make sure things are saving correctly. But now the next part is we want a menu. So here's the chicken and the egg thing. Is you're building out a site, you can do a site map a little bit or a plan of your site to say, what kind of pages are we going to have in our site? So in our example, we're going to have something similar to this. I looked at a couple other animal shelter sites, or just any site you look at. So we're going to have something like an about page, so about us. We're going to have something like a contact us page we'll build out eventually, an adopt page, get involved, et cetera, et cetera. So we know we're going to have a few pages. Our problem is we haven't built them yet, but I want to see what the menu looks like. That's fine. In WordPress, you can do that. You can build a menu without actually having pages. So let me show you how we're going to do that. So I'm going to actually go out of the Kadence customizer and show how to do this in WordPress itself. So back in the WordPress dashboard, if you want to add a menu, you go click on menus under appearance. As you can see, we don't have any menus right now. So first thing you need to do is give your menu a name. So let's call ours main menu. And we want it to display as primary. So this is going to be our primary menu on the website. So I'll just click create right now. And let's start adding some content to it. So again, we don't have any pages yet. So the way I do it, I typically try to build out a skeleton of a menu. And you can do that through custom links. So we want something called about, or about us. Let's make it a little more personal, about us. So typically this can link to anything. This can link to a page on your site. This can link to Google. This can link to anything in the world. But to create a placeholder in WordPress, all you have to do is put the pound symbol in here. So that'll allow you to add a menu item without actually having a page that it links to. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other ones. So we're going to have about us. We're going to have a contact us is also going to be something, but contact us is going to be a sub menu underneath about us. So if you're doing this for the first time in WordPress to create a sub link or sub menu, what you do is you click on this and you drag it over and let go. And now this is a sub item of about us. So just to show you what, I'll finish the menu, then you'll see kind of what that looks like. And so let me just kind of quickly create some more placeholder pages with about us. I'll say adopt. I'll create one that says, and I have a list here, get involved. We won't do too many of them. We'll do get involved, and then we'll do news. So again, news, because that'll be a blog, because later on we're going to do a piece in here with a blog. The donate button is a little bit different. The donate is going to be a page, but it's not a menu item. I'll show you how we'll do that with Kadence. So just remember, this is going to be an actual menu link, but it's going to be slightly different than the others. So at this point, we have, 5 items, a couple items in our menu, and I could save my menu. And now if I go back to that Kadence, let's go back into the Kadence again, and let's go to our header layout. I'm kind of going a long way. There's other shortcuts, as Peter showed, to get here. But now when we look at it, okay, now we actually have some pages. We have some links in here. We have about us. which has a contact us. As you can see, that's the sub menu. And then the rest of these are just parent links. There's no sublinks underneath it. So that's what our menu looks like right now. Again, it doesn't look quite like this yet, but we're gonna get there in a second. So one thing I'll do for while we're here, while we're still talking about the menu, is this also looks a little bit tight to me. These things are all kind of up on each other, as opposed to this one, the menu items are spread out a little bit more. So once again, padding is our friend. So if we go to, let me go to the menu itself, primary navigation. So the item spacing, back to the other question, this one's using ems. So this is a relative spacing unit. You don't have to. So again, there's really three big ones. There's, pixels, ems, and rems. They all, I mean, they kind of work the same. There are some very subtle differences between them, but in this case, just let's not worry about the M part of it. Let's say we just want to increase the space between these guys. So rather than 1.2, I'm going to go up to 2. That looks a little bit better. So that has a little bit of a breathing room now between these. So there's a little bit of space here. But what I really want is, I've got some spacing, I got some items. I really want this in the middle. I don't want this off in the right. So in Kadence, it has this really neat header builder tool that you can see below here. So there's different components you can put into your header. So when you first launch this in Kadence, you can see I can add things in here, like I can add a search icon into our header. I can add social buttons, for social media links for Facebook, etc. But by default, when you create it, it has a logo item in here, and it has a primary navigation all the way to the right. So I want this to be in the middle. So all I have to do in Kadence is, hover your mouse until it turns into the little hand, the Mickey Mouse hand, and then drag that over. Oops, let me grab it. Make sure you grab it properly, and then drag it over, and voila, now it's in the middle. So this layout, and again, we're not going to go super fancy here. We're just doing a 3-column layout here, but in Kadence, you can actually have multiple columns and multiple things in here. So again, what I did was I dragged it from the right, dropped it in the middle, and we're halfway there. We're 2/3 of the way there. So we've got our menu. All right, let me save that again. So now here comes the trickier part. Here comes the button. This is what it's not hard to do, but I had to write the steps down because I kind of forgot how I did it. So we'll go through this slowly together. But here's, again, because we want to take our time, and we're building this site much slower than probably most people would after a while, or again, if you're a beginner, you might take a little bit longer here. But it's worth talking through the process a little bit. So let's look at this button together, because I do think there's some interesting things going on with this button. So by default, this button has a border, right? So it has a border that's green. And again, not our green, but we'll fix that in a minute. And the text on the button is, the donate text is also green. But when you hover over it, all of a sudden it gets filled with green, and the text turns white. So by default, actually the background is white. You hover, it turns green, because white and green. So that's one thing. It's that behavior, that hover behavior, we're going to need to implement in a button. The other piece too is the size of it. We'll talk about that in a minute. and styling. So in a second, I'll show you all those things together. So luckily in Kadence, there's an item in here called button. So let's drop our button in here, and we want it all the way to the right. Oops. See, this is, oh, okay, there it is. It's already in there. So now if you, let me go back, sorry, I clicked too hard. So once it's in there, there's a couple ways you can customize this. In Kadence, if you go next to the gear, again, put your icon next to it, you click on the gear, now it brings up that button. As you can see right now, the button is red, because red is our primary accent color. So I'm going to change that in a second. And so let's call this, this is going to be our donate, right? So we still want donations, even though we are a shelter. This could be adopt. Maybe adopt is the main thing, but I assume we want donations. So donate's our big thing. There's no URL, so I'm just putting the anchor tag in there for now, just kind of a blank. And we want it filled, right? We do want it filled in with some colors for now. But let's change the design to what we want. So click on the design tab. So first thing is, well, I'll leave the size alone. We'll play the size a little bit later. First thing is that border. So we want the border to be, right now it's red. I want that border to be green. So if I click on the initial color of the border, I want that to be our global green. And it's a little hard to see right now because it's behind the red. And then on hover, the hover color, I want it to be green as well too. I want the background initially, you see the background color is actually white. So I want that background not to be red. I want that background color to be white. So our initial color, let's say, is white. Now all the text disappeared. We'll fix that. And I want on hover, when you hover over, I want that thing to turn, I want it to turn green. So our hover color will be green. So here we go. So when I hover, ooh, now it suddenly appears. Going back to our sample again, our initial color of text we want to be green, and then our hover color, we want that to be white. So you set that in Kadence here, this color, again, these are the CSS rules. So color is text color, background color is background, border is border. So our text color, initially, we want it to be our accent color green. And we want it on hover to be white. The reason I'm still not seeing the border is because I've got to set the border. Right now it's saying no border. If I click on this, Kadence gives you a couple of different styles. So you can go, solid line, dashed line, dotted, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to do something simple. We're going to do the just a solid line. So we've got a solid line, we've got 2 pixels, and we've got our colors, right? So this is looking pretty good. So I hover over it, it turns green, it's white. But size-wise, it's not quite as big as we want it to be. So here's our handy ruler again. Let's kind of look at somewhat what we want it to be. Roughly, I don't know, 180 pixels wide-ish or so, something like that. Let me close out of here. So first thing, and by default, what's kind of neat about Kadence is it does have a couple different sizes. We can say large, which was a little too boxy. So I want to do a custom size instead, or you can do, I'm sorry, you can do small, medium, large, but let's do custom. So custom gives us the most control. And I've already kind of tested this out. So just for the sake of time, I'll put in the values in here. I want it to be 10 pixels on the top, 50 pixels on the right, 10 pixels on the bottom, and 50 pixels on the left. So that kind of looks like this. I mean, it's a little bit smaller. It's not quite as squat, but it looks kind of like that. But the other thing I'm going to kind of break away from the design a little bit is I actually like rounded corners for buttons. I'm not crazy about the square ones. So let's put this, let's have it like this, but let's have rounded corners. And the way you do that is through the radius. So if I look at border radius, so we've got a 2 pixel border, let's add a radius in here. And you could slide this thing back and forth and you can see it starts adjusting the radius of the button. So let's go with 50. 50 kind of makes it look a kind of a pillbox shape. So let me publish that. And now we've got our header, it's got our logo, it's got our menu, it's got our button, little pillbox shaped button that highlights when we move things over it. So it's looking a lot closer to this. And again, this is our inspiration. We don't have to look pixel for pixel, perfect matching what this one looks like, but we're getting there. A couple last things in here. I won't do too much more with buttons because we could actually start building some content here, but some other options to consider, and this is probably more to-dos. I'll leave this for to-dos, but I'll just show you some things we can continue to do in the future. And if people want to do extra credit on their own, you can do this as well. If you notice this header right now, it's kind of a sticky header. So what I mean by that is for the sample site, when you scroll down, the header stays in place, it's fixed. Our header, I don't have any content really in here, our header doesn't do that, but there's a setting you can do in Kadence to make it sticky. I'm also not going to show a lot of the mobile stuff yet. I think there's a whole bunch of mobile settings we'll do later, but just to show you what I mean, let me show you what our thing looks like right now in mobile. So if I do the mobile preview down here, by default, it's not too bad, but how does this compare to our sample? So our sample in here, when you click on the menu, but first off, their icon is a different color. I mean, we could change our icon colors of the hamburger icon. Their menu slides down. That's kind of neat. And their menu has the donate button in the menu. Ours right now doesn't. Ours just have those menu items. So you've got to add the button in there. I'll save that for next time. So that'll be part 2. Is when part 3. We'll continue to refine the header, but for right now, we've built the desktop header, It has some sample links in it, and it's looking pretty close to what we had from our sample site. Any questions so far on just building out this header from anyone? Makes sense?
Hey, I followed along just fine.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so
Nice.
we're getting there. We're getting there. So now we've got, let me stop share. Now we're ready to build our actual home page and
The
build
beginnings of the home
on our
page.
home.
Yes, sir.
Back to you, Peter.
Okay, so let me take over. While I'm doing this, questions, I didn't see anything in chat. Feel free, we like group conversation. No, okay. All righty, you see my screen okay?
Oh, look at that. Lovely.
Look at that, I stayed right with you. This is just one of the sample pages, so I'll close this out. My home page is what your home page was right now, which is the default blog page. So what the first thing I'm going to do, going back to the dashboard, is I'm going to go to pages and I'm going to create a home page. So I will say pages, add new. So I have to create the page and I'm going to call it home page. Now, we don't need to call it home page. We can call it, actually, you know, we can call it WP Animal Shelter Home, or just WP Animal Shelter. It's fine. You can really call it whatever you want. In fact, under SEO, we'd have to go back and see what the title is. And of course, with SEO plugins and all, you can have some control over it. And that's, you know, all I'm going to do to start, because I'm going to publish this page. I'm going to also, so when you get a raw install and you go to publish it, it'll give you some checks. I know these checks always show. I will uncheck that. I will publish that. So now when I view this page, I have nothing. I have this boxed content. Oh, and I have to change the boxed content at some point, because that's this kind of layout was not something I want. So I'm gonna make a note. Ray, make sure to remind me when I'm under. So the first thing I'm going to do is under the dashboard, as we looked at before, and you can do this under the customizer. I'll do it under settings, reading. You know, this whole place where you say, I'm going to change my home page will now display a static page, and I'm going to pick the WP Animal Shelter page that I just created. So right now, again, if I go to my home page is this. I am going to now save that change. When I come back here, now at this, again, just at the home page of this site, and I refresh it, I now see that page. I've just told WordPress my home page is a static home page. I picked the page that I wanted. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start customizing it. I'm going to go back to the customizer, and I'm going to check one thing under the layout that I think I missed before, which is single page box. Where did I leave my notes on this? I don't like the boxed layout, but I may have to come back to that because that's a weird, like slightly hidden.
Is that a global setting or is that a page by page setting?
Yeah, it's a global setting, and you can do it page by page. So let's do it on the. We should be able to find it on the page. So let's go there. So I'm on the page, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the page itself, and what we're going to build, and I should bring up that, is the hero section. Turn off this inspector. So on the home page, we've got this hero section. I'm not going to worry necessarily initially about things like animation, because that's out of the box. Those are things that are added by various methods. But we're talking about this main section, which is basically a full width image, the words, the button. This is what we call the hero section. So that's what we're.
Can we take a second, Peter? Sorry, and this might have been something we should have even talked about in part one. So just looking at this page, if you don't mind scrolling down, Peter, and this is something I think even took me a little while of when you first look at a web page, I happened to maybe, just coming from a world of documents and other things, I happened to look at this initially as one big thing,
Yeah.
which is intimidating. But as you start to build more websites, you start to realize, and you look at the world differently, you start to look at these as little sections, and each one of these is a section that you want to build, and you want to think about your site in terms of sections. And that's important because first off, it just makes it easier to build the thing piece by piece rather than being daunting, this huge, this huge multi-page thing. But also when you start thinking that way, you start to see similarities in sections, and you start to think about reuse. I mean, that's something we'll probably cover a little bit later.
Right.
Once you built something one way, it's very easy to copy that section, reuse it later for another purpose elsewhere in your site. So as you're building a site, think about you're building these reusable kind of Lego block sections that you reuse over time. So
yeah, and it's a good point. In fact, there are a lot of new themes and builder environments that are. One of the newest ones out is called Bricks. Oxygen. All of these basically look at this stacking the blocks kind of model, and one of the things that makes that all viable is the scrolling used to be, oh, don't make people scroll. It's not a problem. Making people, most of us are now on phones. In fact, scrolling is better than tapping, depending on. So stacking these sections, a lot of websites now are just one page, where when you touch the menu, you're going to go to a section on the page as opposed to a whole different page. Okay, so let's edit this page. And I should keep, sometimes I like to keep something open on the side. So the first thing I want to do, let me get my notes up. And I know we're getting a little pressed for time. Is the first thing we want to do is set up, and this is something that gets a little confusing, which is in Kadence, there are some properties that are up here in this top little box called page settings, but it's the Kadence page setting. We're used to the gear, which allows us to see the WordPress page settings, and if we have a block, what we're working on. But in Kadence, there is, when you're working on a page, you get this icon up here, page settings, and when you click on that, this is where we see a number of different choices where you can get, again, very granular on a page-by-page level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this page layout to not show, so the boxed, unboxed. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this unboxed now. So where we were boxed and see how it was default, that's where I have to go back to the, and we'll look at that under the global settings. The default is boxed. We're making this unboxed. Now I lost that box side. If I update this and I come back here and I refresh the page, and now I didn't have that little box here. Now I'm kind of full width, but I see I've got the WP Animal Shelter title. Well, on my homepage, I don't want to have the title there. So what I'm going to do is under page title, I'm going to disable that. So when I click disable, I'm going to update it. Now on the editor, it's one of the things that doesn't happen. Some themes will like gray that out a little bit, but this is where when you go now to the home page, to the main page and refresh it, now that page title is gone. And when we get to other pages, we'll decide how we want to display the page title and all. That'll be when we get into page. But on the home page, I don't want the page title. I'm going to start with my hero section. So what I've done right now is literally just said, okay, take the box away, and let's not show the page title. The other thing is, got to find it because it is content vertical padding at the bottom. I think when we get, oh yeah, content vertical padding, this area here, and you'll see why in a second. In fact, I'll wait on this, which is how much padding is around that content area. And in WordPress, a lot of times when we're talking about content area, you're talking, so here's your header, then you have your content area, then you have your footer. So that content area, and that has some default padding and things that are in the global settings, but you can manage that. And I'll show you in a second why we might want to look at that. So okay, let's start building our hero section. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm not adding any plugins, we're just using straight WordPress core blocks, is I'm going to add a cover block. So I'm just going to add the cover block, and just to make it easier on myself to start, we'll give it the green color. We're not going to stick with this, but this is something to look at, and I'm going to just so I have a point of reference to show you, I'm going to say, okay, let's put a cover block there. The default, I added the cover block and I added the text. Now when I go back to my home page, this is what I'm seeing. Okay, so I'm seeing my cover block, and it's where it is. Let's look at that spacing. So that's where I wanted to now come back to the I'm on the page, I'm under the Kadence page setting, and I'm going to say content vertical padding. I'm going to say bottom only, meaning only put the bottom padding that I've put. Don't give me any padding at the top, because I want my hero section to be right up snug against the menu, the header that Ray created. So now you'll see that'll move up, and we can decide how we want to space this afterwards. But now what we're doing is we're basically saying it's header and then hero. So now we've got the hero section. What we'll do is, instead of this green in the cover, now's when we start having some fun with what we want to see. Now, here are the various images, and you'll see, and we won't have time to do this. Maybe we'll do this in another section, but the cat and the dog, love these guys. But what I've done, and I found there's all kinds of tools that you can use on the web. And in fact, there is a tool out there that basically replicates Photoshop for free in the web browser. It's wild, and it allowed me to do things, and I'll show you why. But it allowed me to do things to change the shape of the image. But we're going to start with the default image. So let's just I'm going to take the cat here. And this was what was in Unsplash. And
can you show that click again? You did that pretty quick, even for me.
Yeah, I did. And in fact, I did it wrong. So what I'm going to do is under Add Media. So here's the block. Here are the options for the block that show at the top, right? And in fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over here and make sure that I'm looking at block options too. So right now, I'm just looking at the cover green. I can change that over here under they call it the overlay of the block, to a gray, or really that's that palette that we have. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add media. I'm going to add a background image to this. And once I do that, I'm going to go to upload. You could drag and drop to the media library, again, so many different ways, but I'm going to grab the original cat image, basically resized down, because the original from Unsplash was huge. And if I just drop this handsome guy in here and update it, come back here, okay, there's my cat, and there's an overlay color. So that overlay color here, you can start playing with, well, how dark or light do I want it? Maybe I don't want it dark at all. So I'm going to lighten, I'm going to make that invisible, and I'll go with the raw. So if I update
I'm asking leading questions. Why would you want an overlay color? What does it help you do?
So what the overlay color does is it gives you control over being able to say you wanted to offset, make it really stand out, put a darker color with a white text. You can take your image original, and now by putting an overlay color, you can control the way to look. Or if you want to make that color, say you've got this green format that you want to tint your whole image with a color, it gives you a way of controlling the brightness, darkness, color tint of an image by putting a color over it and then adding a level of transparency. Maybe you want it only slightly green. Maybe that's an appeal that you like, because now it matches a color overlay. Or say we wanted to go with that pink color, even though the cat's got a little bit of pink in there, it's kind of muted down. So it gives you a way of controlling the color just by having the image, a color that you're putting on top of it, and then you're setting the transparency for it. Make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm going to go to, basically no overlay, very slight, doesn't matter. Now if I refresh, if I update that, again, I'm editing the page. I've got a cover block. The cover block I added an image to. When I refresh that, now I can see that page. Now there's my text that I put, right? The cover, that's my live page. This is the page that I'm editing. We're going to get to what we're going to do with that in a second. But here's another thing. So I'm looking at this cover block and I go, well, if I look at my example, it goes full width. So highlighting the cover block, your options here, you've got changing it, the alignment, left, right, center, or full width. When I go full width, I update it. Now I've made the image full width, but we're going to see an issue here. Well, now I've made it full width, but there's a set height. The cat now is zoomed in because I've taken that image and I've in effect enlarged it side to side, right to left, not necessarily the height. So now I've got this kind of close up, and that's what we can manage through looking at. Well, if I change that image, and by the way, here's something really nice that some people miss. The focal point, though, I can still kind of make that work by setting, here's my focal point cover block, the image that's here, and now I can decide, well, what do I want to really show within that area? That focal point picker is a really nice way of doing that. But I want to replace that image with this wider image I created. And when I do that, now because this image is wider, its proportions left to right are wider. Now it fits a little bit better, and we could play with this. I'll bring the dog in and certain and different options, but let's just stick with this for a little while because we haven't really put any content in there. So if I update this, and now I look here and I refresh it, you will see that now instead of it being that super close up, but we can even let's go ahead and do this. So let's go put. I did the same thing. If you can see here, here's the dog image. Then I made it wider. Let's put our dog in there. He's so cute. So again, because that image is wider, and this I could change the focal point if I wanted to, say make sure that his eyes are showing. I can adjust that there, which is really nice. I update that. I come over here. So this is the cover block is great for doing setting up an area with a background image. Well, now let's put the content that we need. Okay, so the first thing I want to put is I'm going to hit enter here because I'm going to be able to add. And if you hit slash when you're adding in an area, you'll bring up your some block choices, and I want to put in slash columns. Of course, you have to be on the block. Right, I'm going to do it a different way. This happens sometimes. This is the classic thing why people honestly get frustrated. I want to add columns. So I'm going to add a 50-50 column, but see how it's below here? I'm going to now take this, oops. This is why people get mad. So I'm going to do this. There's the plus sign I was looking for. I was in the block. I'm going to put in a column block. Yeah, it's right there. Put in 50-50. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I wanted that text to only show up on the left half of this block. So now in this, so I've added a column block that I put 2 columns inside there. Now I can start putting my heading. What was our heading text, Ray?
Let's do the help a pet in need.
Help a pet in need. And now we can decide, is that the right color that we want? And I think it's not. So under my block, so this is all this is a heading block. Under color settings, there's my palette. I'm going to pick the dark color. Right. So I just went to there. Now I'm going to put a paragraph here, which is the default. It's also in the block. It often defaults to the white color. What do you think? I don't have any text off the top of my head here.
I mean, it's pet adoption, so, or animal shelter, so. Yeah.
And we'll adjust this.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got this cover block. I'm going to update that, come back here. And now you can start seeing where in this, there's a cover block. There's a column block with 2 columns. Within the left column, I've put a heading and a paragraph. And in the right column, I've got nothing because I don't need anything there. My beautiful dog is looking at me here. Now, if I come here and I hit enter, and now I want to put in a button. So I hit /buttons. And now, again, defaulting to the action, what button do we want to have here?
You can do learn more or adopt today or something like that. Or, yeah,
learn more. Well, what if we wanted both?
Yeah.
We could put in a second learn more. Well, let's do that. And the way buttons work is once you put in the button block, you can go to you can add your link. You know, this is we're relying on our hashtag links there. So now that's the link there. But I can add a second block that might be adopt now, and so here are my 2 buttons. We'll adjust those in a second. But if I update that, and now you can see that, you know, we're getting close, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got the learn more, the adopt now, our main section. Maybe we want to make this this text. We can adjust the text size to, I don't know, 48. How big is that? It's too big for this. And we can tweak the width of the columns. If I go to columns, and by the way, anyone who hasn't seen this, when you're in a block, then you hover in the block. What it'll do is the block that pops up above is the parent block for that block, which the other way to look at it is when you look up here in the list view, you can see that I have a cover block, I have columns. Column 1 has a heading, a paragraph, buttons. In the buttons is a button and a button. Those are the 2 buttons that I have. I have a second column with nothing in it. This is the structure here. And in the upcoming version of WordPress, by the way, what's really nice is this list view will toggle on and off on the left. So you will, if you want to always see that, and in fact, click on a specific place, you can go to that particular thing to edit. This list view and the list view that's going to be shown as a way that you can toggle on and off is going to be great. Toggling on and off, by the way, is something that's also when you do your, you know, if you're adding a new block in the block picker. But you know, here is this hero section that is nothing more than a cover block, columns, so I can position it. And I didn't even necessarily need the columns. I could have just justified that. But if, say, this paragraph was longer and I just wanted to wrap it, this gives me some design control. Or if I wanted this column to go 60%, say I look at the columns and you know, this column width is a percentage, and let's say I wanted this side to be 40%, and I wanted this column this column here, there it is, to be 60%. That's now, if we had an outline, I actually have a plugin or some code that lets me see the outline. You'd see that this is 60% and this is 40.
Hey, Peter,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
quick time check there. So we got
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Which is fine. Part of it is, I think, is we said, we're building this slowly, hopefully, because people are seeing that, we're taking the time to talk through some of these things. But I think also, even though it sounds simple, there's still, I think, some work to be done on all of our sections. So even this section, I like the dog picture. I want to keep the dog picture. But
Okay.
flip over to the Duda one for a second, or sample, if you bring it up. Because I do think even this hero section, I would still say we probably still want to do some adjustments to it. Like I'd say the width looks fine, but can we get the height bigger?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I'll show you that I know I could show you that really fast. So come here, replace the image, put our dog back in, and we'll go over this as we talk about other, like I like to generate blocks, way of managing kind of like what their version of the cover block is called a container. But another thing you could do is you could do, this is where that some people kind of think it's lame, but the spacer.
yeah.
So the spacer block is a block that you could put, and then you can, you can set the spacer. The default is we put the dog in there and we space it down, then we put one in the bottom. I could take this and I can duplicate it. And now I got 2 spacers, and I'll move this one below.
So basically, spacer is just adding kind of padding in the middle, kind of like an idea of padding, so you don't have to go and add padding to the top and bottom of something.
Exactly. Exactly. It's just yet another. Yeah, that looks great.
So why don't we talk then about so from a next step standpoint.
Let me stop sharing. You could take over.
Yep. Okay, somebody just asked a question about lost people not familiar with blocks. Well, so again, the intent of this is we're certainly not expecting anyone to follow along live while we're doing it. What I suggest to people is go back afterwards, rewatch the recording, see if you can follow along the steps of what Peter and I were doing. It's one of those things you're not going to know until you try it and see where you stumble. So what I'd say is, where you do stumble, that's a good learning opportunity. So bring that up to us either, as I said, we'll send out all this information afterwards too. We'll send out, like we always do, we send out a link to the recording when it's available on our YouTube channel. We'll send out all these design assets. We're gonna make those publicly available, all the images, the logos, etc. So try to follow along with us, because we'll adjust the pace to this too. Or if we're missing steps, and that's where we definitely want feedback from folks, are the things that we're doing too quickly or steps that we're assuming that people know that we're maybe not showing. So we'll definitely appreciate your feedback too. So you can send it to us through Meetup. You can send it to us probably most quickly through our Facebook group. That's where we can respond to things and kind of answer questions for everyone. But we'll bring that feedback back to our part 3. So our part 3 we'll kind of step back again, show what we built, show our to-do list, and our intent is to keep building through, this whole homepage step by step. So over the course of several parts, we don't know how many. The hardest one's always a homepage, at least in my experience, is get that out of the way, because that sets the pattern for everything else. And then we're going to build out those other pages over time and add more functionality to it. So hopefully folks are getting stuff out of this. Again, if you're really new to WordPress, it seems like we're doing a lot of things, but again, watch this at your own pace, watch it over again, follow along step by step, and bring us your feedback.
Yeah, and I think what we'll do is build into the next one, a recap, and if there were questions on this, because I'll tell you, doing it live, and we follow people who do the stuff. Anyone who's doing the stuff live are always running into it. You see polished tutorials on because they've edited stuff out. So I don't feel so bad about that. But at the same time, I hope it shows you that you can fumble a little bit and go and figure it out, because again, we're molding with this wonderful piece of software versus carving wood or stone. So
cool. So thanks everyone again for joining us. Like I said, we hope you'll stick along and follow this project through, and we hope to see you all next month. So Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Yep.
You're welcome.